327 million Americans watched as Jasmine Crockett dropped a bomb inside Congress. Trump is nothing more than a child predator shielded by power. Behind her sat 14 victims, trembling, while 100,000 classified DOJ files lit up the chamber. Screens, gasps erupted when a top Republican finally broke ranks, screaming, "We can't protect him anymore." In that single moment, the world saw power, betrayal, and horror collide. But the real question is, will this be America's justice? Or its collapse? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The gavel barely touched wood when Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, eyes blazing, voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. "Mr. President," she declared, her tone shaking the air, "you are not a leader. You are a child predator hiding." Behind the American flag, the room exploded into chaos. Gasps burst from every corner. Reporters scrambled, their cameras flashing like lightning in a storm. Republicans roared with outrage, fists slamming on desks, spitting words like venom. Lies, outrage, disgrace. But their nose couldn't drown out the echo of Crockett's words hanging like smoke in the chamber. Trump slammed his hand on the desk, his face twisted red with fury. "That's a lie. She's trash, political garbage." His voice boomed across the hall, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker, a twitch. A man cornered. Jasmine didn't flinch. Her voice came back, sharper, colder, better trash than a predator-in-chief. Her words landed like a hammer blow. Gasps again. Reporters mouthed the phrase, knowing it was already racing through social media, destined to headline every broadcast within minutes. The president shifted, tried to sneer, tried to laugh it off, but the sneer cracked. Jasmine leaned closer to her mic, her stare pinning him down. 14 victims, she said, her voice lower now, heavy with grief and fire. 14 young lives torn apart. Their silence bought with deals made in smoke-filled rooms. And you didn't just look away, you promoted the very men who cut those deals. You protected them, you protected yourself. The chamber quaked with tension. Democrats leaned forward, nodding, whispering, "Keep going." Republicans barked order, but the chair's gavel was useless against the storm. Jasmine's words were fire, and no gavel could put it out. Trump rose halfway from his seat, jabbing a finger at her. "This is treason. You're nothing but a disgrace to Congress." His voice cracked with desperation, not power. Jasmine didn't blink. "Treason," she shot back. "Treason is betraying your country's children. Treason is covering for a trafficker while you sat in the Oval Office. Treason is you." Mr. President, the room was no longer split. Even those who hated her couldn't look away. A victim in the gallery sobbed openly, her cry piercing through the shouting. The cameras caught it all. Crockett's unyielding glare, Trump's trembling fist, the tears of a survivor. "America deserves the truth," Jasmine thundered. "And the truth is this: our president is a predator shielded by power. He calls it patriotism. I call it perversion of justice." The silence that followed was electric, suffocating. Millions watching at home felt their breath catch, their pulse quicken. Crockett leaned back, eyes locked on Trump. "So tell us, Mr. President, how much longer can you hide behind the flag before the whole country sees the monster standing beneath it?" The chamber fell into stunned stillness, the question hanging in the air like a noose. Jim Jordan shot forward in his chair, his voice tearing through the uproar. "You're disgraceful, Crockett. You don't deserve to sit in this chamber." His face was crimson, veins straining at his neck, spittle flying as if fury alone could silence her. Jasmine turned her head slowly, eyes narrowing into steel. "Disgraceful," she spat back, her words like a whip crack. "At least I'm not kneeling to a pedophile president while pretending it's patriotism." Gasps rattled across the gallery, a ripple of shock that even the cameras struggled to catch. Matt Gaetz leaned back, smirking, his laugh sharp and cruel, the kind that begged to be broken. "You sound unhinged, Jasmine. America's watching. You humiliate yourself." Jasmine pivoted, voice low but slicing. "Sit down, frat boy. You're next, because when I'm done exposing him, the country will remember exactly who defended the indefensible." Gaetz's grin faltered, his knuckles tightening on the desk as if he could squeeze the moment out of existence. The chamber had become a battlefield of insults, accusations, and raw contempt. GOP loyalists shouted out of order, but their voices cracked under the weight of the spectacle. Democrats pounded the table, chanting, "Let her speak," Let her speak. While reporters scrambled to relay every word, their headlines already burning across screens nationwide. Jasmine raised her voice above the chaos, her tone molten. You can scream, you can smear, you can throw every insult in the book, but none of it changes this. The man you bow to is not just corrupt, he is a predator, and history will brand every one of you who covered for him. Trump snarled from across the chamber, face red, finger jabbing wildly in her direction. You will pay for this. You are nothing but filth. Jasmine snapped back, her voice unshakable thunder. Filth washes off, predation leaves scars that never heal, and I stand with the scarred, not the predators. The victim in the gallery sobbed louder, the sound cutting through like a blade. For a moment, even the Republicans froze, the human cost of silence dripping heavy in the air. Jasmine seized it, her stare burning through the chamber. This is not just a fight for truth. This is a fight for the soul of America. Every insult you throw at me is another shield you raise for him. So tell me, how much longer will you kneel before power, before you admit the blood on your hands? The chamber collapsed into a stunned, trembling silence. Jasmine leaned into the mic, one last time, her voice a dare wrapped in fire. Call me trash, call me disgraceful, call me whatever you want. But when history speaks, it won't remember your excuses. It will remember that when the truth stood at your doorstep, you chose to guard a predator instead of a nation. The shouting hadn't yet died when Jasmine reached under the desk and pressed play on a small black recorder. The chamber fell into an uneasy hush as William Barr's voice filled the air, flat and cold, reverberating through the speakers. Protect Trump at all costs. The words lingered like smoke, heavy, poisonous, undeniable. Reporters jerked their heads up, pens frozen. Gasps rippled through the gallery like shockwaves. For a moment, even the president's defenders didn't breathe. Trump shot up from his chair, face blazing. Fake, that's a doctored tape. Total fabrication. His fist hammered the table so hard the microphone squealed with feedback. She's inventing lies. She's trying to stage a coup. But before his roar could take root, Jasmine yanked a thick folder from her bag and hurled it across the desk. Pages scattered across the wood, their cover stamped with the seal of the Department of Justice. The top page bore a signature, bold and unmistakable. Her voice cut through the air like a blade, not fake. Signed by your DOJ, their initials, their memos, their words. And now, their silence. The chamber exploded again. But this time, the nose was jagged, fractured. Some Republicans shouted forgery, while others sat stone-faced, their eyes darting between the president and the damning black ink on the page. Democrats leaned forward, eyes gleaming, chanting, "Read it! Read it!" as the gallery buzzed with disbelief. A young intern scrambled to collect the papers, only to pause when she realized the signatures were real, the dates a lie, the evidence too specific to dismiss. Jasmine raised her hand, commanding the chaos. You can scream all you want, but the voice on that tape belongs to William Barr, your Attorney General, the man you trusted to guard the law. And what did he say? Protect Trump at all costs. Protect you, Mr. President, not the children, not the victims, not the people of this country. You. Her tone dripped with disgust, every syllable stabbing deeper. Trump tried to laugh, but it came out cracked, hollow. She's desperate, she's dangerous. She's a liar. Jasmine leaned in, her glare unrelenting. If I'm a liar, then swear on oath right now that Barr never said those words. Swear on oath that these memos don't exist. Swear on oath that you've never hidden behind your cronies while the truth rotted in the dark. The chamber fell. Silent again, all eyes on Trump. His mouth opened, then closed. No words came. A chill ran through the hall. Members of his own party whispered to each other, some shaking their heads, others avoiding his gaze. A victim in the gallery let out a strangled sob, and every camera swiveled to capture the tears streaking down her face. The image of pain collided with the sound of power unraveling. Jasmine straightened, her voice now low growl that carried through every microphone and into every living room in America. If the president is guilty, and the evidence screams that he is, then the question isn't just about him. The real question is this: who else in this chamber has been covering for him, trading silence for power, loyalty for blood? The words detonated like dynamite. The chamber froze, the nation held its breath, and for the first time all night, Trump had no insult, No slogan, no shield, just silence. Trump lunged for the mic, his voice cracking the chamber like a whip. "You're political garbage, nothing more than a pawn for the radical left." His finger stabbed the air toward Jasmine, his face a furious mask of red. The words echoed through the hall, but before the applause of his allies could swell, Jasmine tilted her head back and laughed, sharp and merciless, the kind of laugh that cuts deeper than any insult. She leaned into her mic, eyes burning through him, and, "You," she said, each syllable like steel dragged across concrete, "are America's most dangerous child molester." The chamber erupted into chaos. Lawmakers shouted over one another, reporters shouted into their phones, and the gallery gasped as if struck by lightning. CNN's chyron flared across the bottom of screens nationwide within seconds. President called pedophile on live TV. Phones buzzed. Hashtags detonated. America's living rooms turned into battlegrounds of disbelief and rage. Trump banged his fist on the desk, sputtering, "Outrage. Treason. She's a liar." His voice carried desperation, not authority. And the cameras caught the tremor in his hand. Jasmine didn't blink. Her words were fire. "You can scream liar 1,000 times, but it doesn't change the truth. 14 victims' stories are not garbage. They are scars burned into America's conscience. And every time you shout me down, you're shouting them down too." She gestured to the gallery, where survivors sat stiff and trembling, one gripping her seat so hard her knuckles turned white. The chamber stilled for half a breath, the human weight of Jasmine's words pressing on every chest. Jim Jordan leapt up, trying to rescue his president, barking, "This is slander. This is political theater." Jasmine's gaze sliced toward him. "No, Congressman. Political theater is pretending loyalty while you kneel at the feet of a predator-in-chief. This is justice." Her voice rose, filling every corner. "If calling out the truth is slander, then let history slander me forever." Gasps and murmurs surged again. Reporters scribbled furiously. The country had just witnessed a moment that couldn't be erased. Trump pointed his finger again, but his words tangled with fury. "You're destroying America." Jasmine's reply came like a thunderclap. "No, Mr. President, you already destroy innocence, you shredded justice, you mock the flag you hide behind. I am not destroying America and saving it from you." The words punched through the chamber, raw and unyielding. And for a second even his defenders faltered, caught in the storm of her conviction. The gallery was a portrait of chaos, Republicans shouting for order, Democrats chanting truth, truth, journalists pushing against barriers, flashes igniting like sparks on a battlefield. Jasmine's face didn't flinch. She had become the storm itself, untouchable in her fury. And then she lowered her voice, steady as stone, so the room was forced to lean in. "If you want to call me garbage, fine. But when the truth of your crimes drowns you, when the evidence screams louder than your insults, tell me, Mr. President, what will America call you then?" The silence that followed was heavier than all the no's before, a silence that carried more terror than any scream. The uproar had reached a fever pitch when a single voice cut through the chaos, steady but trembling with conviction. A Republican, known as one of the party's moderates, rose slowly from his seat. His face was pale, but his words were sharp. "We can't defend this anymore." The chamber froze. The words hit harder than any insult Jasmine had thrown, harder even than the evidence she'd unveiled. For the first time, the fracture inside the GOP had cracked wide enough for the nation to see. Cameras swung to capture his face, reporters nearly tripping over one another to get the quote out first. Trump spun toward him, eyes burning, spittle flecking his lips. "Coward," he roared, "traitor, you think you can turn on me in front of the entire country? You disgust me, you're nothing without me." His voice, once a weapon, now sounded more like the scream of a man cornered. The moderate Republican didn't sit back down. Instead, he shook his head slowly, as if finally shedding a weight he had carried too long. "No, Mr. President," he said quietly, "we're nothing because of you." Gasps broke across the chamber. Some Republicans looked away, others whispered frantically, torn between fear and fury. Jasmine leaned forward, seizing the moment like a blade finding the weakest point in armor. "There it is," she said, her voice slicing through the stun. "Silence. The truth you've buried is clawing its way out, and now even your own party can smell the rot." She turned her gaze to the row of Republicans shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "How many more of you will keep pretending loyalty while the whole world watches you defend the indefensible?" The gallery erupted, half shouting support, Half screaming in rage, CNN's ticker flashed again, this time in bold red. GOP cracks on live TV. Trump's fists clenched, his knuckles white, his words slamming like gunfire. You're all weak. Without me, you're nothing but losers. Do you hear me? Losers. He scanned the chamber, but the energy was different now, the crowd no longer leaning toward him, recoiling. His own party members avoided his eyes, afraid to be caught on camera nodding, afraid to be the next scapegoat. The betrayal had begun to spread like a virus, contagious and irreversible. Matt Gaetz barked back in desperation, trying to stem the tide. Stay together. Don't let her divide us. But his voice cracked, and Jasmine seized the opening again. Divide you, she scoffed. No, Congressman. I'm not dividing you, your president is. He's turning his fire on his own allies, because even he knows the dam is breaking. Her words hit like a hammer. The cameras zoomed in on Trump's face, twisted with rage and fear, beads of sweat gathering at his temple. The chamber had become a theater of betrayal. Every second broadcast led to millions who could feel the unraveling in real time. Jasmine's eyes narrowed, her voice calm, deadly. When a leader calls his own allies traitors, when loyalty is bought with silence, tell me what happens when the silence finally ends. The words hung in the air like a sentence already passed, and in that instant, even Trump seemed to realize the ground beneath him was no longer solid. The chamber trembled with noise, and suddenly cracked apart with something more powerful than any insult. From the gallery, a voice rose thin, broken, but sharp enough to pierce the storm. A young woman stood, her shoulders shaking, tears cutting down her face. He knew. She sobbed, her words echoing in the chamber's dome. He was there. The entire room froze. Reporters dropped their pens. Lawmakers turned in unison, faces pale, eyes wide. The sound was not political, it was human, raw, undeniable. Every camera swung instantly, lenses zooming, capturing the raw anguish written across her trembling lips. The air turned heavy, suffocating. All at once, the nose died. Even the Republicans who had been screaming for order dared not shout her down. The sob sliced deeper than politics. It was the kind of cry that haunts a nation. The camera cut back to Trump, his hand, once balled into a fist of defiance, now shook visibly. His lips moved, but no words formed, just a stammer, a quiver. Millions watching saw not strength but fracture. Jasmine seized the moment, her voice like thunder cracking against marble. Tell them, Mr. President, she roared, her body leaning forward as though she could drag the truth out of him with sheer force. Where were you that night? Where were you when the cameras failed? Where were you when the children cried for help? Her words slammed against the silence like hammers against stone. The young woman's sobs grew louder, echoing through the chamber until even the sound techs flinched at their headsets. Trump's face contorted, a grotesque mask of fury and fear. This is stage. I don't know her. She's lying. But his protest landed like a stone tossed into a void, flat, unconvincing. The victim cried harder, her voice breaking but still audible. You looked at me, you saw me, and you turned away. Gasps ripped across the chamber, a collective intake of breath that felt like the nation itself choking on disbelief. Jasmine's eyes blazed, her hand slamming the desk with such force the mic rattled. Answer her. Look her in the eye and tell her you weren't there. Look this nation in the eye and tell us all you didn't know. Trump's head jerked, his eyes darting, his lips trembling with half-formed words that refused to come. The silence from him was louder than any denial. The chamber was suffocating in its stillness, a tension so tight it could snap with the slightest spark. Reporters whispered furiously, headlines already composing themselves. Victim confronts president, nation stunned. Even his allies looked unsettled, trapped in the glare of a truth too raw to shield. Jasmine leaned closer, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper that carried like a gunshot. Your silence screams louder than your lies, and the country hears it. The words struck like the crack of a verdict, leaving the chamber quivering, and as the cameras closed in on the victim's tear-streaked face, on Trump's trembling hands, on Jasmine's unyielding stare, one question rippled across America, echoing in every living room. Will a victim's word topple the most powerful man alive, or will silence once again bury justice? The chamber was already hanging by a thread when Jasmine reached down and pulled out a small silver recorder. Without warning, she pressed play. A crackle of static, then a voice, calm, authoritative, undeniable, poured through the speakers. Bouncing off the marble walls, Sacrifice Epstein. Shield Trump, for words, and the entire Capitol seemed to stop breathing. The sound was unmistakable. Oval Office timbre, the cadence of power spoken in hushed tones meant never to see daylight. Lawmakers stiffened, staffers dropped their pens, and even the cameras seemed to zoom closer, as though the lenses themselves could not believe what they had heard. For one impossible heartbeat, silence consumed everything. Then, chaos. Fox News cut its live feed in seconds, their screen fading awkwardly to commercial. MSNBC erupted with split-screen anchors shouting, "We have breaking news." CNN's banner exploded in red, "Secret tape implicates president." On Twitter, hashtags detonated like fireworks, timelines flooding with disbelief and rage. But, inside the chamber, the weight of those words pressed down like a boulder on every chest. Trump lurched to his feet, face twisted with panic masquerading as anger. "That's fake, a deep fake, AI trickery. You think America's stupid enough to believe this garbage?" His voice cracked, and the microphones caught the fracture. He pounded the table so hard his water glass toppled, shattering across the floor. His allies shouted in unison, "Fake, forged, lies," but none of it landed. The tape was still echoing through the speakers, repeating like a curse, "Sacrifice Epstein." Shield Trump. Jasmine didn't flinch. She held up a transcript, stamped with the presidential seal, the ink dark and damning. "Not fake, documented, corroborated. Your own Oval Office, Mr. President." She tossed copies toward the press bench. Pages fluttered through the air like falling knives, reporters scrambling to catch them, their faces blanching as their eyes darted across the words. The victim in the gallery let out another cry. "Ryan Piercing, you knew," she screamed, her voice breaking as she pointed at Trump. "You knew and you let it happen." Every camera pivoted, the image of pain now forever fused with the sound of power unraveling. Jasmine's voice rose above the storm. "How do you explain this, Mr. President? How do you explain your own walls whispering betrayal? Was it all theater? Was it all lies? Or is this finally the truth you feared the most?" Trump's mouth opened, then closed, words stammering into fragments. He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow, desperate. His hands shook visibly, and the cameras did not miss it. The chamber watched him unravel, not with slogans, but with silence. Jasmine leaned forward, eyes burning like coals. "This isn't my tape. It isn't their tape. It's yours. And it tells America everything they need to know. When faced with justice, you didn't fight for the truth. You fought to bury it. You chose sacrifice. You chose silence. You chose yourself." She paused, letting the weight of every word hammer down on him. The gallery was trembling, the chamber vibrating with tension. Allies looked away. Defenders muttered excuses no one believed. And Jasmine delivered the final strike of the moment, her voice soft but lethal. "If the Oval Office itself recorded your betrayal, then tell me how many of you in this chamber were complicit in keeping that door shut." The question detonated, reverberating across every corner of America, leaving the nation suspended between shock and dread, wondering how far the rot had spread, and how deep the silence truly went. Trump lurched forward, gripping the mic with both fists, his face flushed crimson, his voice shattering the chamber like a thunderclap. "Treason! Treason against me!" Spit flew from his lips, veins bulged at his temples, the raw fury of a man unraveling before the eyes of a nation. He slammed the desk so violently the wood cracked beneath his palm, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "This isn't justice, this is a coup, an ambush. You're trying to overthrow the President of the United States." The chamber erupted in chaos, half the Republicans shouting "Order! Order!" while Democrats banged their fists in defiance. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned into her mic, her eyes locked onto Trump with the precision of a marksman. Her voice cut through the nose, sharp as glass. "No, this is not treason against you. This is justice against you." The words landed like a hammer blow, silencing even the chance for order. Trump's face twisted, his body jerking as if the word justice itself was poison. He jabbed his finger across the aisle, his voice rising to a shriek. "She's lying. She's destroying this country." His allies shouted in chorus, a desperate wall of no's meant to shield him. That's when Jim Jordan launched forward, his body nearly over the desk, barking with rabid loyalty. "You will not insult the president like this. You're disgracing this chamber." Jasmine's head snapped toward him, her voice dropping to a lethal calm. "Disgrace?" she asked, her words vibrating with contempt. The only disgrace here is watching a grown man wear his loyalty like a leash to a predator. The chamber gasped as if she had struck him across the face. Jordan froze, his mouth hanging open, his rage collapsing into stunned silence. Reporters scribbled madly, their pens scratching like fire. Trump roared again. "I am your president. You will obey me." The declaration sounded less like authority and more like desperation, a man clinging to crumbling walls. Jasmine rose from her seat, standing tall, her voice booming across the marble chamber. "You confuse obedience with respect, and power with truth, but look at yourself raging, trembling, calling your own people traitors. The only treason here is the betrayal of your oath, the betrayal of the victims you abandoned." The gallery stir, a victim sought echoing once more, amplifying the moment with unbearable weight. Trump tried to point again, but his hand shook, so violently the gesture collapsed into a quiver. His silence screamed louder than any denial he could muster. Jasmine stepped closer to the mic, her tone now soft, intimate, but deadlier for its calm. "You can shout treason until your lungs collapse, but the truth doesn't tremble. The truth stands, and tonight, it's standing against you." And as the words settled into the bones of the chamber, the camera zoomed in on Trump's trembling frame, capturing the image that would circle the globe in enrage. Broken man unraveling live before millions. The question that lingered in every living room across America was no longer whether he was guilty, but how long the country could endure the spectacle of a president drowning in his own lies. The chamber was still vibrating from Jasmine's last strike when a new sound cut through the nose, hesitant at first, then sharp as a blade. From the Republican bench, a young congressman rose, his voice trembling but resolute. "We can't cover this up anymore." The words detonated like dynamite. Every head snapped toward him, allies glaring in disbelief, Democrats leaning forward with stunned curiosity, reporters scrambled, cameras zooming. As the split inside the GOP finally broke into the open for the world to see, Trump's head whipped around, his face blotched red with fury, his voice a guttural snarl. "Shut up. Sit down, you pathetic coward." He pointed a shaking finger at the young lawmaker, then at others who dared to whisper among themselves, "You think you're better than me? You be nothing without me. I made you. I carried this party on my back, and now you stab me in the heart? Traitors, every one of you." His words dripped venom, not leadership. The loyalists screamed, "Stay with the president," while the dissenters lowered their eyes, shame and fear battling in their throats. The split was no longer hypothetical, it was bleeding across the floor. Another voice rose from the Republican side, stronger this time. "Enough. We swore an oath to the Constitution, not to a man." The chamber gasped. Two more joined in, their voices overlapping. "The evidence is real. We can't defend this. It was rebellion." Live on national television, a fracture tearing through the Republican fortress. Trump's fury exploded, his voice cracking with rage. "You're weak, spineless. Without me, you're finished." He pounded the desk, saliva flying, sweat glistening on his brow. The cameras caught everything: the shaking hands of his allies, the panic in their eyes, the unraveling of a party once chained to his command. Jasmine seized the moment like a hunter cornering prey. "Do you hear them, Mr. President? The silence breaking? The truth seeping through the cracks of your empire. Even those who once knelt are standing now, because the weight of your sins is heavier than their fear." Her words tore through the chamber, forcing every lawmaker to face the live collapse of their own unity. Some Republicans sat frozen, others buried their faces in their hands. The one solid wall of loyalty was splintering into shards before the eyes of the nation. Trump shouted again, but his voice had lost its grip. "You're nothing without me. I am the Republican Party." The words echoed hollow, landing not as a declaration of strength, but as the desperate cry of a man watching his fortress crumble from within. His own allies stared back, eyes wide with the realization that they were chained to a sinking ship. And then came the silence, terrifying, unbroken, a silence heavier than all the screams before it. Jasmine leaned into her mic, her tone razor sharp, her eyes locked on Trump but her words slicing through every corner of the chamber. Is this the crack that will shatter the Republican fortress, or the moment America finally breaks free of it? The question hung in the air, like a verdict, yet to be written, daring the nation to answer. The news broke like a detonation, ripping across every television, every phone, every radio frequency in America. President accused as pedophile on live TV, The chyron burned red on CNN, MSNBC cut into regular programming, even Fox hesitated. Before stammering through their defense, within minutes, the streets outside the Capitol were boiling. Protesters surged against barricades, their voices a thunderous roar. On one side, furious chants of justice, justice, and signs scrawled with the names of victims. On the other, Trump loyalists waving flags, screaming witch hunt, fake news. The air was thick with rage, sirens wailed, police lines strained, and America's fracture line was no longer metaphor, it was painted across the streets of D.C. Helicopters circled above, their spotlights cutting through smoke as chants grew louder, sharper, more dangerous. One protester screamed into a megaphone. He covered for Epstein. He covered for monsters. The crowd erupted, fists raised, tears in eyes. Across the barricade, counter-protesters bellowed back, "You lie, he's our president, hands off." Scuffles broke out, fists flying, cameras catching every second. Reporters' voices shook as they broadcast the chaos, headlines shifting from the chamber to the streets. Capitol grounds descend into unrest. Inside, lawmakers could hear the rumble of the crowd through the marble walls, the sound of a nation tearing itself in two. Jasmine glanced toward the gallery windows, her eyes reflecting the flicker of protest signs lit by street lamps. She spoke into her mic, voice steady. "Listen to them. This is America's soul on fire. This is the cost of silence. And this is the storm he unleashed." Her words weren't just aimed at Trump, they poured through every camera into the living rooms of divided families, where arguments now erupted over dinner tables, children asking their parents why the president was being called a predator. Trump's face tightened as the chance of "lock him up" drifted faintly into the chamber. He pounded the desk, trying to drown them out with his rage. "They don't speak for America. I speak for America." But even as he shouted, the microphones outside captured voices that were louder, raw, undeniable. A young woman held up a photo of herself at 14, screaming through tears. He knew he was there. That image, carried live on national TV, became the spark that spread across every state, igniting marches in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and beyond. The Capitol Police radios crackled with panic. Crowd swelling. "We need reinforcements." The chamber quaked, not from voices inside, but from the nation's fury battering at its doors. Jasmine leaned forward, eyes never leaving Trump, her tone like a knife sliding between ribs. "You can deny the evidence here, Mr. President, but step outside, step into those streets and you'll hear what America truly calls you." The cameras cut to his trembling face, beads of sweat rolling down his temple, while the roar of the protest bled louder into the broadcast. And as chants of justice now clashed with cries of "Save Trump," the question gripping every viewer was no longer if the country was divided, but whether this night marked the moment if finally shattered. The chamber shook with the echoes of the protest outside, the roar of two Americas colliding just beyond the marble walls. It was in that trembling silence between chants that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez rose from her seat, her voice cutting like a beacon through the storm. "This is bigger than politics," she said, her eyes blazing, her hands striking the desk. "This is about children." Her words ricocheted through the hall, searing into cameras broadcasting live to millions, and for a fleeting second even her fiercest opponents could not summon a rebuttal. Jasmine Crockett followed without hesitation, her voice rising like thunder behind AOC's flame. She leaned into the mic, each word deliberate, drenched in fire and grief. "And America's soul." The chamber erupted again, Democrats pounding the table in unison, Republicans jeering in fury, the gallery trembling under the weight of history unfolding in real time. The words weren't rhetoric, they were a verdict, a mirror held to a nation teetering on collapse. Trump laughed then, a sound that chilled more than it mocked, jagged and manic. He tilted back in his chair, teeth bared, his eyes wide with a kind of madness that looked more desperate than powerful. "America's soul," he sneered, his laugh swelling into a roar. "America is me." His arms stretched wide as if to embrace the chamber, to swallow the entire nation whole. The image was grotesque, one man conflating his survival with the identity of 300 million people. Jasmine struck back instantly, her tone cold enough to still the air. "No, Mr. President, America is not you. America is the girl who cried out from that gallery, the families who have waited years for truth, the millions screaming outside these doors. America is every victim you silence and every truth you dairy, and it will survive you. Her words landed like thunderbolts, shaking the chamber to its core. The crowd outside roared louder, as if her voice had carried through the stone itself. Republicans shouted back, some rising from their seats in fury, fists pounding desks, their faces pale with fear of what was unraveling. One barked, "Blasphemy! He is the voice of the people," but their cries rang hollow against the rising tide, drowned out by the chants bleeding through the walls. The camera zoomed in on Trump, his laughter faltering, his mask slipping. His smile twitched, his eyes darted. He had claimed he was America, yet in that moment, America itself seemed to recoil. The chamber bowled with rage, grief, and defiance, but Jasmine's voice cut through once more, steady, unyielding. America is watching, America is choosing, and the choice is not between left and right, it is between truth and rot, justice and betrayal, children and the predator who hides behind power. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the faces of Republicans who still clung to silence, daring them to break. The silence that followed was unbearable, broken only by the echo of protest outside, and the hum of cameras capturing every beat of sweat on Trump's brow. And then Jasmine delivered the line that froze the nation, her words like a blade pressed against the heart of power. "You may call yourself America, Mr. President, but when history writes this moment, it will not see you as its soul, it will see you as its sickness." The chamber erupted like a powder keg. Republicans shot to their feet, screaming across the aisle, Democrats pounding their desks in defiance, reporters shouting into phones as the air fractured with fury. Words no longer resembled debate, they were weapons hurled through microphones, daggers of accusation and rage. One Republican thundered, "Lies, all lies," while a Democrat slammed back, "Look at the evidence." The cacophony swelled until it was no longer human voices, but the roar of a nation collapsing into itself. Trump rose again, his face crimson, veins bulging, his voice shredding the air. "This is treason. This is a lynching of the presidency." He pointed at Jasmine with a trembling hand, spitting venom. "She's the enemy of America. She wants to burn this country to the ground." Jasmine fired back, her voice slicing through the nose. "No, Mr. President, the fire is yours. You lit it when you chose predators over children, power over truth, silence over justice." Her words collided with his like thunder meeting steel. The chamber convulsed, the gallery crying out as if the very walls could not contain the fury. Security surged forward, Capitol officers forming a barrier between the benches as lawmakers shouted, fists slamming against wood. One officer shouted for order, another raised his hands, but the flood of anger drowned them. Reporters stood on chairs to capture the spectacle, cameras rolling as history slipped into chaos. The chants outside grew louder, bleeding through the windows. Justice now, justice now. Asterisk mixing with the chamber's violence until it felt as though the Capitol itself was under siege, not from without, but from within. Amid the storm, Jasmine stood tall, her voice unwavering against the roar. "This isn't chaos by accident, this is chaos by design. And it was born the day you sold America's soul for your own survival." The chamber gasped as Trump lunged forward, shouting over her, "I am America. Without me, you are nothing." His words were desperate, manic, swallowed by the wave of voices crashing all around. His allies screamed, "Stand with the president." But cracks spread further across their line, some lowering their eyes, others frozen in silence. The spectacle of unity had collapsed into civil war before the eyes of millions. Capitol security pressed harder now, holding back lawmakers on both sides as if preventing an eruption of fists. The speaker's gavel pounded helplessly, its echo lost in the roar. America was watching, not a hearing, but a battlefield. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice calm, lethal, the kind of voice that slices deeper than any scream. "You call this democracy, Mr. President? No, this is the wreckage of your lies. And the question before us is simple. Can democracy survive when its leader is accused of the unforgivable, or will this chamber become its grave?" The words hung like a noose in the silence that finally followed, and for the first time, the question didn't belong to Jasmine alone, it belonged to the entire nation, staring into the abyss. Jasmine rose slowly, the chamber already bowling with chaos, her hand trembling as it gripped the edge of the desk. But when she spoke, her voice was steel sharpened to a blade. "Mr. President, you're not America's protector, you're its Predator, the words cut through the storm like lightning, and the chamber went silent not from respect, but from shock. Every camera locked onto her, every microphone leaned closer, as if the entire world had been waiting for that single sentence. Trump staggered back as if struck, his lips curling into a sneer. Lies, disgusting lies. His hands clawed at the podium, knuckles whitening, but his voice had lost its resonance, a hollow echo of defiance. Jasmine pressed forward, her tone rising with fire. A protector shields the weak, a predator hides in the dark, cloaks himself in flags and slogans, and devours innocence while demanding loyalty. And that is what you have done, not once, not by mistake, but as the very foundation of your power. Gasps ricocheted through the hall, reporters, pens scratching like sparks, the words already destined for headlines that would scorch across the globe. Her voice grew louder, shaking with fury, but guided by conviction. You hid behind lawmen who bent the rules, behind prosecutors who sold justice for promotions, behind allies too cowardly to speak truth to power. But today you hide behind nothing. Because the truth is here, the victims are here, and the country is watching. She slammed her hand on the desk, the crack of flesh against it echoing like a gunshot. The gallery erupted in cries, officers tensed at their posts, and yet not a single eye dared turn away. Trump roared back, I am your president. I alone can save America. His voice cracked on the last word, breaking under its own weight. Jasmine stepped forward, her eyes narrowing, her words sharp and merciless. You cannot save America, because America is what you've been feeding on. You've drained it of truth, of decency, of justice, just to protect yourself. You are not the nation's shield, you are its wound. The chamber erupted, half in fury, half in thunderous applause, the sound colliding into a storm that rattled the very windows. Jasmine raised her voice above it all, her body shaking now not with fear but with uncontainable force. History will not remember your slogans, it will not remember the rallies or the chants or the banners. It will remember the night America saw its president accused not of corruption, not of incompetence, but of preying on its most vulnerable. And it will remember who had the courage to say it to your face. Her stare pierced him, her final words landing like a verdict already carved into stone. You call yourself the protector of this republic, but tonight, Mr. President, the world knows you for what you are, the predator that nearly consumed it. The silence that followed was unbearable, thick and trembling, as if the nation itself was holding its breath, and as every camera zoomed in on the trembling fury in Trump's eyes, the only question left hanging in the air was whether America had the strength to break free of the predator it had once crowned. Trump's face drained of color as Jasmine's final words echoed through the chamber. His hand gripped the edge of the podium, then released, trembling. For the first time that night, the man who styled himself as untouchable looked small, cornered. He muttered something inaudible, shoved his chair back, and lurched toward the aisle. The cameras followed every step, the nation watching in disbelief as the sitting president tried to flee his own reckoning. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Reporters screamed into phones, the president is leaving. He's leaving. The gallery erupted into chaos, some shouting coward, while others jeered, their voices rising like a wave. But before he could reach the doors, two Secret Service agents stepped in his path. Their orders were clear: no one leads until the session is adjourned. The cameras caught it. The most powerful man in the world stopped cold, his breath shallow, his face twitching with rage and fear. Trump spun back, wild-eyed, jabbing his finger at the agents. Move. I'm your president. Do you hear me? You're president. But they didn't move. The chamber roared louder, lawmakers pounding their desks, the image of a leader caged by his own power. Jasmine's voice rang out again, cutting through the bedlam. There it is, history's moment, America's predator caught in his own trap. You can't walk away from this, Mr. President, not tonight. Not ever. The spectacle was unbearable, surreal. He tugged at his suit jacket, adjusted his tie with shaking hands, but nothing could disguise the panic etched into his body. The mask had shattered. This was no longer the image of authority, it was the portrait of collapse. CNN zoomed in, the chyron blazing, breaking, president cornered in Capitol showdown. MSNBC called it the fall of an empire. Even Fox, stammering, cut away to panelists at a loss for words. Inside, the silence stretched, broken only by Trump's ragged breathing. Jasmine stared at him, her voice calm, razor sharp. You can pound tables, you can shout treason, You can scream at your own allies, but you can't run from truth. And the world just saw it. They saw you try to escape. The gallery fell deathly quiet, every eye locked on him, every camera capturing the image of a president unraveling under the weight of accusation. He looked around, desperate, searching for anyone to stand up and shield him. But the Republicans who had once leapt to defend him now sat frozen, their eyes averted. The loyalty that once roared now swallowed in shame. The chants outside grew louder, filtering in through the marble walls, colliding with the suffocating stillness inside. And as the nation watched its leader tremble before the truth, Jasmine delivered the blow that sealed the moment in history. This is what predators do when cornered. They lash, they scream, they run. But America isn't running with you. America is standing still and watching you fall. The chamber sat in breathless silence, the cameras lingering on Trump's shaking hands, and the question that gripped millions was no longer whether he would leave but how far America would fall with him. The chamber had already been shaken by Trump's failed attempt to leave, but the true earthquake came not from Jasmine, not from the Democrats, but from the very party that had shielded him. A senior GOP leader, one of his longest-serving allies, a man whose loyalty had been armored through scandal after scandal, rose to his feet, his voice graveled but unshakably clear. "We can't stand with him anymore." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. For a heartbeat the chamber stopped breathing. The press bench erupted, journalists stumbling over one another to get the line out first. Phones buzzed, feeds exploded, headlines already drafting themselves in fire. Trump's head snapped toward him, his eyes blazing, his mouth twitching with disbelief. "What did you just say?" His voice cracked, equal parts fury and desperation. "After everything I've done for you, for this party, you dare turn on me now?" His fists clenched the podium, shaking with rage. "Coward, traitor. Without me, you are nothing. Nothing." His voice shrieked higher, sounding less like power and more like panic. The GOP leader didn't sit down. His hands trembled slightly, but his spine held straight. "No, Mr. President, we are nothing because of you. We swore an oath to the Constitution, not to a man, and tonight, the line is clear." Gasps crashed across the chamber like a wave, Republicans shouting in disbelief, Democrats stunned into silence. Trump pounded the desk again and again, the wood splintering under his rage. "You owe me everything. I built this party. I carried you all on my back, and you will not betray me now." But the silence from his side of the aisle spoke louder than his screams. One by one, Republicans lowered their eyes, their faces ashen. Some shifted in their seats, others whispered frantically, calculating the cost of sinking with him. The cameras caught it all, the first crack spreading into a fracture, the fortress beginning to crumble. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice slicing through the tension. "There it is, Mr. President, the beginning of the end, not from me, not from the Democrats, not from the media, but from your own." Her words ignited the chamber like kerosene on flame. Trump's face twisted into something grotesque, rage and fear battling for dominance. He pointed at the GOP benches, his voice shattering under its own weight. "You will regret this. I am your kingmaker. Without me, you're finished." But his words fell into a silence that thickened with every passing second. The nation was watching its leader humiliated not by enemies, but by the collapse of his own foundation. The gallery erupted in murmurs, the protests outside roared louder, and for the first time the balance inside the Capitol tilted unmistakably against him. The cameras zoomed close, capturing the sweat dripping down his temple, the tremor in his jaw, the desperate fire in his eyes. And Jasmine, steady as ever, leaned into her mic, delivering the line that carved the moment into history. "When loyalty finally breaks, so does the crown. So tell me, America, is this the moment your president loses his throne?" Outside the Capitol, the air itself trembled with fury. Thousands of voices fused into one primal scream that rattled the barricades, fists pounding the night sky with a rhythm older than politics. "Justice, justice, justice." The chant rolled like thunder down Constitution Avenue, echoing through every alley of Washington. Protesters waved signs painted in blood-red letters, "No more silence, truth over power." Predator in chief, across from them, counter-protesters bellowed, "Save Trump," and "Witch hunt." Flags snapped in the wind as the two Americas faced each other, separated only by metal rails and the trembling arms of overwhelmed police. Inside the chamber, the sound bled through the marble, a heartbeat that lawmakers could not ignore. CNN split its broadcast into two windows. On one side, Jasmine standing at her desk, fire in her eyes. On the other, a sea of bodies outside, their throats raw from screaming. The chyron blazed in red. Live. America demands verdict. MSNBC called it a people's uprising. Even Fox, scrambling, could not deny the sound of the crowd that would not be silenced. Trump heard it too. The chants pierced the chamber. Like arrows, his jaw clenched. His fingers tapped nervously against the desk, betraying a man who could no longer drown out the noise with slogans. Jasmine turned toward him slowly, letting the voices outside do half her work. Do you hear them? She asked, her words slicing through the tension. That is not Congress, that is not me, that is America. And they are delivering their verdict. The chant surged louder as if on cue. Justice. Justice. Shaking the very glass in the windows, Republicans squirmed in their seats, some stealing glances at the doors as if the chants might burst through and drag them out into the streets. Democrats pounded their desks in rhythm with the crowd. The gallery erupted into applause, tears streaming down the faces of survivors who finally felt the weight of silence lifting. Reporters whispered frantically into microphones, describing the moment as a collision between the will of the people and the power of the presidency. Trump slammed his palm down, roaring, "They don't represent America. I do." His voice cracked, drowned out almost instantly by the relentless chant outside. Jasmine's eyes never left his. Her voice was soft but sharper than a blade. If you were America, Mr. President, the people wouldn't be screaming for justice. They'd be screaming for you. The lie detonated, ricocheting through the chamber and out into the streets, where the chant changed, grew, evolved into something fiercer. Justice now. Justice now. The CNN split screen burned itself into history. On one side, a president trembling, his face red and twisted with rage. On the other, a nation unified in fury, its voice louder than any gavel or speech. And as the chants roared louder, Jasmine leaned into her mic, her words aimed not just at Trump but at the millions watching. Tonight, America has spoken. The only question left is whether its leaders will have the courage to listen. The silence that followed inside was suffocating, broken only by the thunder of justice outside. And the nation watching asked itself, trembling, was this the sound of democracy fighting for survival or crying out its last breath? Jasmine rose once more, her chair scraping against the marble, the sound cutting through the chamber like a blade. In her hand she lifted a small, worn booklet, its cover faded, its pages dog-eared, but its weight heavier than any gavel. She raised it high above her head, her arm trembling, not from fear but from the enormity of what she held. The room fell into a hush so deep it seemed even the chants outside paused to listen. Her voice rang out, iron wrapped in fire. This belongs to the people, not to a predator. The gallery erupted, tears spilled down cheeks, survivors clutched each other, and lawmakers who had hidden in silence bowed their heads, as if the words themselves carried the weight of a verdict. The chamber shook with gasps and cries, a storm of grief and fury, the air crackling with the raw electricity of history unfolding. Trump shifted uneasily, his eyes darting to the booklet as if it were a weapon, as if its very presence had stripped away his last shield. He snarled, but no words came, only a shallow breath, a stammer swallowed by the silence that now belonged to her. Jasmine's voice thundered again, echoing off marble, pounding through cameras into millions of homes. This is not your shield, Mr. President. This is not your weapon. This is the promise of a nation, written not for kings or predators, but for its people. And tonight, those people are demanding justice. Her hand shook, but her eyes did not, burning with the fury of every name etched into memory, every life silenced too soon. The Constitution gleamed under the chamber lights, fragile and indestructible, all at once, its weight no longer symbolic but revolutionary. The chamber roared, some in cheers, some in rage, but the sound was one, deafening, unstoppable. Reporters scribbled furiously. MSNBC declared, the Constitution just became a sore. CNN's chyron screamed, Crockett wields the people's power. Even Fox, reluctant, could not cut away from the image filling every screen. A black woman, arm raised to the heavens, holding the nation's founding promise against the most powerful man alive. Trump slammed his fist, shouting hoarsely, "That's I am America." Jasmine lowered the booklet just enough to aim it at him like a dagger, her voice a whisper that cut sharper than any scream. "No, Mr. President, America, is this end? It has already judged you. The chamber collapsed into tears, chants, and fury, a single nation tearing itself apart under one roof. And as the cameras froze on Jasmine's raised hand, millions watching asked themselves if they were seeing the rebirth of democracy or the last desperate gasp before it drowned. The chamber had barely settled from Jasmine's thunder in Alexandria. Ocasio-Cortez rose, fire in her eyes, a single sheet of paper clenched in her hand. She held it high for every camera to see, her voice slicing through the uproar. I submit a motion to impeach the President of the United States effective immediately. The words detonated across the hall. Reporters gasped, lawmakers erupted, and the gallery cried out as though history itself had split open. Phones lit up, chirons blazed red, the words impeachment motion filed on live TV flashing across screens from coast to coast. Trump's face twisted, his body jerking forward with fury. He slammed the desk, his roar ripping through the chamber. Coup. This is a coup, his voice cracked under its own desperation. You're thieves, traitors, liars, you want to steal America from me. His finger jabbed wildly at Jasmine, at AOC, at anyone within reach, as if accusation could shield him from the collapse unraveling at his feet. The Secret Service stepped closer, their eyes darting, their hands twitching, but even they hesitated at the sight of a president unraveling under the lights of the world. Democrats thundered in support, pounding their desks in rhythm. Impeach. Impeach, impeach, the word rolled like cannon fire across the chamber. Republicans splintered, some shouting outrage, while others sat in stunned silence, their eyes betraying the weight of betrayal and inevitability. The protests outside merged with the roar inside, the building itself vibrating with a verdict that no gavel could silence. Jasmine stepped toward the mic, her voice cutting above the storm. You call it a coup, Mr. President? No, this is democracy, reclaiming itself from the jaws of corruption. This is America tearing its promise out of your grip and placing it back where it belongs, in the hands of the people. Her hand gestured to the Constitution still lying on her desk, its pages glowing beneath the lights. The crowd inside and outside fused into one voice, rising into a single demand. Justice. Justice. The cameras zoomed in on Trump's face, trembling with rage, sweat sliding down his temple, his mouth opening but failing to form words. For the first time, he looked not like a leader, but like a man cornered by the very nation he once claimed to embody. The silence that followed was unbearable, broken only by the pounding chants outside shaking the Capitol windows. And then Jasmine delivered the line that turned the moment into a cliffhanger written in fire. The question is no longer whether we have the courage to act. The question is whether America will choose justice or collapse into chaos. The chamber froze, the nation held its breath, and history itself trembled, waiting for the answer. The Capitol hearing may have ended, but its shockwaves ripped through every corner of America. In living rooms, families split down the middle, husbands and wives shouting across dinner tables, parents at war with their own children over whether the president was a savior or a predator. At schools, teachers abandoned lesson plans as students demanded to discuss what they had seen on television, voices trembling as they asked, if the president can do this, who can we trust? Across campuses, debates raged until midnight, friendships fractured, and entire classrooms became battlefields of belief. News channels replayed the tape on loop, anchors dissecting every word, every tremor in Trump's voice, every tear from the gallery. Talk radio boiled with rage, some callers swearing Trump was a victim, others calling for his immediate arrest. The country was no longer governed by headlines, it was governed by the echo of Jasmine's voice. You're not America's protector, you're its predator. And then came the letters. Survivors, once faceless and voiceless, began writing in droves. One stood out, read aloud on live television. A victim's handwriting shook across the page, but her words carried fire. You gave me back my voice, Jasmine. For years, I thought silence was my only home. Tonight, you burned that silence to the ground. As anchors wiped their eyes and millions listened, America realized this was no longer just politics, it was a reckoning that had torn the mask off power itself. The final shot lingered on Jasmine's name scrawled at the bottom of the letter, her voice echoing across the airwaves without her even speaking. And the question now haunting a nation was simple, searing, and inescapable. If the truth could topple a president, what else might it bring crashing down? The aftermath was brutal. Jasmine's phone lit up day and night, thousands of messages, each one a battlefield of love and hate, Death threats dripped with venom. You'll pay for betraying him. We know where you live. But alongside the darkness came an avalanche of gratitude. Mothers thanking her for protecting their daughters. Veterans calling her the defender of America's honor. Strangers whispering, "Don't stop, you speak for us." She read them all, the praise and the poison. Her hands shaking, her resolve hardening. Security surrounded her home. Bulletproof glass installed overnight. But no barrier could shield her from the emotional weight pressing in. Each step outside was a gamble, each public appearance shadowed by fear. And yet, every time she walked into the chamber, she carried the voices of those who had written her, as if their faith had become her armor. One night, as she left a hearing, a survivor stepped forward through the crowd. Tears streaked her face, but her words were steady, whispered like a prayer. "You gave me back my voice." Jasmine froze, her own eyes wet, the power of those words heavier than any threat she had received. That single whisper echoed louder than the thousands of screams against her. It was the price of courage, sleepless nights, threats of violence, a nation tearing itself apart, but it was also the reason she stood taller with each passing day. And as America watched her walk back into the fire, the question that lingered was no longer whether Jasmine could withstand the storm, but whether the storm itself could withstand her. The chamber had dissolved into chaos and history, but Jasmine stood unmoved, her gaze locked on the red light of the live camera. For a moment, the noise around her blurred into silence, the chants outside muted, the fury of Congress drowned by the weight of what was about to be said. She leaned into the mic, her voice steady, her eyes unflinching, as if she were speaking, not just to the room, but to every kitchen table, every classroom, every living room in America. America is not for sale. Justice is not for sale. And neither are we. The word slammed through the lens like a gavel striking against the nation's conscience. Gasps filled the chamber, some in awe, some in rage, but all recognizing they had just witnessed a line that would outlive the night. Reporters dropped their pens, anchors whispered in disbelief, survivors in the gallery clutched one another, tears streaming as Jasmine's voice reverberated through them like a lifeline. Even those who opposed her sat frozen, knowing that sentence had already been etched into history books. The camera zoomed closer, her face filling the frame, the tension in her jaw, the glimmer of defiance in her eyes. She didn't blink, she didn't look away. "This fight is not mine alone," she continued, her tone sharpening into steel. "It belongs to every person who ever believed this country was worth saving, every victim who was told their pain was inconvenient, every citizen who still believes truth can outlast power." Her words rang with the gravity of a closing argument, a nation's soul put on trial. The screen cut to black, the silence immediate and crushing. Then, in blood-red letters, a single phrase appeared across the void. "Truth demands witnesses." It burned into the eyes of every viewer, impossible to ignore, impossible to forget. And then came the call that pierced through the silence. A challenge more dangerous than any threat. "Comment below, does justice still belong to the people?" Millions sat frozen in their homes, the question lingering like smoke, daring them to answer, daring them to choose which side of history it would stand on. In the end, this story is not just about politics, it is about courage in the face of power, and the cost of speaking truth when silence feels safer. Jasmine's fight reminds us that justice is never automatic. It is claimed by those brave enough to demand it. Each of us carries a responsibility to confront injustice in our own lives, no matter how overwhelming it seems. The question is not whether corruption exists, it always does, but whether we have the will to challenge it. So I ask you, when your moment comes, will you raise your voice or stay silent? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.